Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Woolen, and I'm your host this evening for Inside Scoop. Tonight, we have with us the president of the Northern Virginia chapter of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Gina Wood. Gina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Absolutely. So I can't wait to let our viewers know everything about the organization, the work that you all are doing. I'll probably just save myself some breath and refer to you all as NCBW.
That sounds fine.
Okay.
That's very cool.
So before we get into the initiatives and the projects and the wonderful things that your organization is doing, well, first tell us about you. Tell us about your background and kind of what led you to NCBW.
Would be happy to. So, I had an opportunity to get to know the National Coalition of 100 Black Women probably about 15 years ago when I was working at an organization called the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies based in Washington, D.C. And the Joint Center is an organization that was founded right after the Voting Rights Act. And the main purpose of the Joint Center was to work with Black elected officials. So I came at a time when we were going through a transition with a new president, and there were several initiatives that we were working on. And the one initiative that I really had passion about and was leading was on health disparities. And so as a result of that, and we got a large grant from the Kellogg Foundation, did a lot of community, advocacy work around the issues. It was actually during the time of the Obama administration and trying to get the Health Act passed. And so the coalition had invited me to come and speak at one of their conferences. So that was my introduction to the organization. And as I got to know more about their main focus, which is advocacy on behalf of Black women and girls, I became just really interested. I had a lot of friends that were involved in the coalition, would attend some of the chapter meetings in the region all the way to Delaware and Philadelphia, and just really got excited about it. And then the president at the time for the Northern Virginia chapter reached out to me because they were going through an intake process, and she knew that I had a passion about advocacy. And so that was really the reason that I got involved, was one, because of my friends who were very active both at the local level and the national level, but also because I live in Northern Virginia and I always want to be a part of my community in terms of the things that I do, particularly from a voluntary perspective.
Yeah. So before we get into your work with NCBW, it sounds like you care about policy.
Oh yeah.
So where was that? How was that birthed?
Oh, that was birthed shortly after I finished college, actually, and I lived in Oregon for actually 12 years. And I had a wonderful opportunity to work for the first Black woman elected to the legislature. And that was just really my path.
Did you say Oregon?
In Oregon.
I know no one from Oregon.
You know no one from Oregon?
No one.
Well, now you know.
Now
I'm not
I know.
from Oregon, but I lived there.
Wow.
I'm originally from Missouri, but was there for 12 years, and it was probably the best decision I made after college. And I was, pretty young to be the first Black woman elected to the legislature, but more importantly, to be her first legislative assistant. And
So I'm sorry. So the first Black woman to be elected to the Oregon legislature. The Oregon legislature. What year was this?
This was 1985.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And she since has become just a legend, in terms of her experience and really advocating on issues that affect Black women. So not only did that really sort of shape my focus on public policy, the legislative process, but really helped me to better understand issues that impact Black women, because she being a Black woman, the first Black woman, a lot of pressure put on her in terms of her carrying that. Now, there were other African American men that had been elected in both the House and the Senate, but being the first Black woman, and in a state like Oregon that has such a small percentage of African Americans, was pretty significant.
Wow. I think it's just so interesting. One reason why I was super excited about this show is the concept of intersectionality. And I think that was penned by Kimberly Crenshaw. Don't quote me on that if I'm wrong, you all. Don't judge me. But the aspect or the point of intersectionality is kind of understanding how the different identities or factions of who we are, how they impact our experiences. And I think that one reason that Black women have been so instrumental when it comes to our democracy is because of us being, women, and then just having to deal with that struggle upward, and then Black women, and just kind of having that bottom up perspective, and how important that is to stabilize our foundation within our democracy. So, so having said that,
yes.
So how did that your kind of roadmap contribute to you kind of getting into NCBW?
You know, throughout my career, I've always wanted to be a role model in some way. You know, when you think about just getting out of college, you're sort of trying to create your own career trajectory. But I always think about, what am I doing to help the next young Black woman? And so that's been something that, even in my professional career, but particularly in my volunteer work that I do in the community, that's always been something that I've cared about. Particularly in Oregon, you know, when I talk about such a small community, I think back about the experiences that I had there and how it really framed my thinking on many issues. There was a young Black girl who had been killed in Oregon, and I can't remember now the exact scenario, but it was a brutal situation and no one seemed to care about it. And the Black women in the community really came together, and what was interesting is we decided to host something called the Black Women's Gathering. And it was an opportunity to bring Black women together to talk about what happened to this young woman and why no one seemed to care about what happened to her, right? That she lost her life. And so that was the first opportunity that I ever had to be involved in sort of a collective group of women representing different professions, different socioeconomic backgrounds, to just give us a chance to come together, not only to celebrate, but was really something that we sort of coined from at the time of Essence and Susan Taylor's In the Spirit. That was one of the things that we focused on, was our mind, our body, and our spirit. And that was kind of the theme throughout these gatherings. So that was really the first time that I really had a chance to really think about, you know, the impact that Black women have and what's happening to us, right? Even today, I think we're finally recognizing the power of our voice. And again, that's another sort of step towards really wanting to be involved, because when I think about other organizations, you know, our Black sororities, other civic organizations, all have an advocacy component as a part of their mission. But the sole mission of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women is advocating on behalf of Black women and girls. And that was what was most appealing to me, to want to be a part of the organization.
Wow. So obviously you didn't come in as president of the Northern Virginia chapter.
Right.
So what was your trajectory?
Like most things that I get involved with, I try to learn as much as I can about the organization. So because the president at the time knew that I was a big advocate in terms of public policy, she immediately asked me to be the chair of the Public Policy Committee. So that was really what started the whole trajectory of my sort of assuming the leadership, I think, even of the organization, was I spent a lot of time, you know, every year we would go to Richmond with the other chapters. There's actually 3 other chapters in the state, and we would come together and we would look at what legislation was being introduced, and we would go meet with our members, either our state delegates or our state senators, in Richmond every January. This was prior to the pandemic, and even during the pandemic, we would host Zoom meetings with them, and we would still do our legislative day. So that was the one thing I was excited about, is to get to know more about Virginia as a state, because I had the state experience coming from Oregon. The other thing that I really enjoyed is that we're part of a national organization. So we're one of 27 affiliates, or well, not 27 affiliates, but we're actually one of, I believe, 67 chapters across the country in 27 states. So there's over 3,000 members across the board. Very similar to if you think about other organizations, be it a sorority or other civic organizations. But again, our primary focus is on public policy and advocacy, with a focus on health, education, economic empowerment, which are probably the 3 biggest issues that impact Black women the most when you think about the data that shows where we are on the whatever the schematics is or the metric. But also our national organization hosts a legislative day every year during the spring. So this is when all the chapters come together and we go meet with our congressional delegations and our U.S. senators. And so we've been really fortunate because we have such good relationships both at the state level, the national level, but it's not just legislative issues that we focus on. We also work at the local level in terms of with school board members. We work with our county council. You know, we've had a lot of opportunity working with the Fairfax County Council, serving on different task forces. A lot of our members are getting appointed to some of these boards and commissions, because that's one of the things that I've really talked a lot about. It's important that we do the advocacy and we go meet with members. It's equally important that we serve on these various boards and commissions as well in the decision-making role.
Absolutely. Representation matters.
Absolutely.
It's important to be in those spaces where decisions are being made, even if it's just to listen and take that information and bring it back to your organization to help them make informed decisions. Wow.
Very true, very true.
Okay, so you talked about the main purpose of NCBW. What's the history, like how long has NCBW been kind of in existence?
Yeah, so the chapter actually started in the state of New York, actually. And it's interesting because because of the name, it says, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. Sometimes people think that there's only 100 Black women involved, but there's a lot more. But literally, the national chapter got started by women in New York who were just concerned about what was happening in their community. And this goes back into the early 70s. Wow. And so they came together, started meeting like Black women do in the kitchen, having these conversations and beginning to think about what can we do to make a difference? How do we become more advocates? Because in many instances, their husbands were in professional roles, and they had access and the ability to make a difference. Wow. But if you really bring it back to Northern Virginia, what I'm excited about is that next year we're celebrating our 40th anniversary. And interestingly, being here in Fairfax, and particularly Arlington County, is where we're chartered. And so we were chartered in 1984 as a chapter. And one of our founders was Evelyn Syfax. She was an educator, prominently known in Arlington, Virginia, and brought together women. Some women that were part of her family, her extended family, came together and decided to start the chapter here. And I'm happy to say that of all those women, when you think back, 1984 is kind of a ways back, but when you think about the women who were involved during that time, these were women who were professional women for the most part, women who to some extent had means. We have one charter member that's still alive today.
My goodness.
And interestingly, her name is Frances Wood, and no relation, but she's just almost 100 and just attends the meetings when she can. She dials in when we have our Zoom general membership meetings. And just a real legend for us, to have that history. We've lost a few of our charter members the last couple of years, but it's nice to know that we still have her with us. And so we're going to be doing some really exciting things, I think, next year and throughout the year to celebrate our 40th anniversary.
Wow. I think one of the most prominent things that you said that your organization focuses on is policy work. So what's one of maybe your main flagship topics or areas of concern?
So when we think about sort of our legislative agenda, both locally and nationally, it really centers around those three areas of health, education, and economic empowerment. But certainly there's been other issues as we've evolved as an organization that are also equally prominent for us. One of the things that we got heavily involved in with the whole issue around student loan forgiveness was a big issue for us. Most recently, and one of the things that came out of our National Legislative Day was the whole issue around gun violence. So that's a big issue. We're seeing it continuously in the northern, in Virginia in general, but in the DMV area, there sort of rotates around. But for the most part, that's a big issue for us, is the gun violence, student forgiveness, and then also some of those health and education and economic empowerment issues as well.
Fantastic. Make sure you don't go anywhere. Come right back with our conversation with Gina Wood.
I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back.
Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead.
I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go.
Some friend you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about ripped off life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again. But an awkward silence can be a great thing, like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
And thank you so much for coming back and joining us for the Inside Scoop as we continue our conversation with the president of the Northern Virginia chapter of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, President Gina Wood. Gina, so when we left off, we were talking about the different legislative initiatives that NCBW was going forward with. So what's the flagship, or what's the first thing, what's one of the number one things that's important to the organization?
It's probably hard to think of one, like the number one thing, because they all, in many instances, are all very interrelated. But they all sort of fall under the areas of health, education, economic empowerment. So you can imagine things like in the education field, it's really like student loan forgiveness. And that's a really big one because, you know, there's probably, I think the last statistic that I saw, and it's probably increased by now, is that there are 42 million people that actually have, or actually I think it's 1 in 6, actually have a federal student loan that needs to be forgiven, basically, right? And the majority of those are either Black or Hispanic, Latino, for the most part. And I can only imagine of that number how many might be Black girls, for example. So that's a big issue for us, and we really advocated when the president put forth his advocacy and his platform in terms of being able to do that. And he's still pushing for that. And so we'll continue to advocate for that because we know the impact, particularly here in the state of Virginia. Virginia has one of the better systems in terms of being able to be prepared where parents can start early, but it's still a problem. Education is extremely expensive. The other issue that has been really important to us was when Congress was really focused on the Voting Rights Act. And so voter suppression has been a big issue for us. We've done a lot in terms of get out the vote. We've done a lot of the calls. We've done a lot of postcards. So that's another grassroots effort. And a lot of the work that we do in our advocacy is not just as an individual organization. We partner with other organizations, NAACP, fraternities and sororities, other civic organizations are all part of, because we realize that that's where you get the power in terms of being able to make a difference. So that's been really important to us as well. I think probably, again, I don't want to say it's the number one issue, but it's one that has been very concerning to us, is the issue around the gun violence issue. And lately there's been a lot of situations for Black women. When you go back to the Breonna Taylor situation, and even more recently, the young woman in Florida, where, I don't know if you heard about it, it's a small town in Florida, and the name of the town is Ocala, I think is the name of the town in Florida, very small community. And a young woman who went to her neighbor, because this is a situation where the neighbor was complaining about her kids, grabbed the kid's iPad. And so that has been really concerning, where the woman literally went, knocked on her door, and the woman just shot her in front of some of her children even. And that's an ongoing situation where there's just a lot of issues with regards to that issue and some of the others that we found. You know, we're finding Black women being missing, you know, all sorts of things. And so those are some of the big issues we're concerned about in terms of like Black women being missing because no one really pays attention. You don't see their pictures on these milk cartons. But the gun violence issue is very concerning, and particularly in this region. You know, in most of your major cities, you're seeing a lot of increases in the gun violence issue. And then certainly, you know, on the economic front, we're very concerned with Black entrepreneurship. And so helping folks have access to capital for their businesses. You know, a lot of Black businesses particularly, and even with women-owned businesses, people tend to start their businesses with a credit card. They don't have access to capital. So really helping to provide those tools to individuals with regards to what's involved in being able to start your business. How do you do that, right? Financial literacy, and of course one of the big issues right now in Fairfax County is the whole issue around housing and homelessness. So we pretty much cover the gamut and really try to keep a pulse on what's going on in the community and making sure that we're targeting those issues where we can have the greatest impact.
Absolutely. And so I know that NCBW has created some resolutions. First, for our viewers, explain the importance of the power behind resolutions, and then share some that you all have created.
So we've done this both at the national level and the local level. Oftentimes we will follow the lead of our national chapter or the national coalition in terms of that, but it gives us an opportunity to make a statement, a firm statement in terms of our advocacy efforts. So we share those resolutions with other organizations so they know where we stand on a particular issue. Because some organizations take a different approach with regards to how to address an issue from an advocacy perspective. And so we try to make it very clear through our resolutions and provide the data as to why this issue is important. And again, most of it is because it has an adverse impact on Black women and girls. That's really the primary focus of what we do. So anything from our student loan forgiveness is one of the resolutions we did. We've also done resolutions on metabolic syndrome. We focus a lot on mental health. We do a lot, again, the voter suppression is a big issue for us and will continue to be. You know, this is a election year for Virginia. So it's something that we've already begun to focus on. Next year is a national election where we'll be looking at the president, vice president election will be coming up. Going to be very controversial, as we know, because we've got a Black woman who sits at the number 2 spot.
That's right.
And so that's one of the things that we're very concerned about. And certainly, you know, one of the things that we were very proud of is that we have our first African-American woman elected to Congress from Virginia, with Congresswoman McClellan. And we're starting to see more Black women being elected in the state of Virginia. And so that's one of the things that we've been following and really thinking about how do we help people in the community recognize these Black women. So one of the things that we also do that was started by one of our founders was something called the Ebony Image Award. And so we recognize Black women in different categories as well as an up and rising star. So there could be a young girl, could be high school age, and we also recognize her for her, seeing her as a rising star in whatever field she might be interested in. And so we've recognized women who are either elected to office. You know, I think it was it Fairfax that had its first Black woman head of the NAACP. You know, so we've got women in different positions, judges and others. And so again, looking at ways to kind of raise their profile, raise their visibility, so that people know that Black women are becoming to take on these new leadership roles in our community.
Absolutely. I think it's important for people to understand why we need to focus on that particular demographic. I think a few years back they were saying that the largest, the population of people, the largest demographic that occupied the space of starting small businesses, most of them were Black women. And we all know that small business is the backbone of the U.S. economy.
Absolutely.
So absolutely we need to make sure that this portion of our population is taken care of, that they are secure, that they are safe, that they have the resources that they need if we care about our economy as a whole. I mean, sometimes we just have to draw that big picture to help people understand why we should all be concerned about this demographic. And all of us are important. I'm not saying that one group is more important than anyone else, but I think we all have to sometimes just get out of our own fishbowl, essentially, and understand how we all fit together.
Yeah, and one of the things, that's a very good point, because one of the things I think when people think about, you know, small businesses, they're thinking about a small business that might have 100 employees, for example. And there are several of those, but the real engine in the United States of who's really driving the economy are those businesses that are called micro businesses, the microfinance community, right? So that's like 10 employees or less. Those are the ones that are really doing the employment. And that's where you're going to find the majority of our Black women and people of color really within that sort of frame, right? And they're the ones that there are organizations out there that we support that are trying to help those individuals have access to capital, because oftentimes they're being denied access to capital by banks. And so now there are certain programs within some of the banks that are allowing for them to have access to capital, and they're getting, you know, loans, but they're not loans, so you don't have to, they're being forgiven in different situations. There's an organization that we partnered with, and we actually honored their president, called the Association for Enterprise Opportunity, and they really focus on that population of small business owners.
Wow. And
they're making a huge difference in our economy.
Talk a bit about why we should care about policy like health policy surrounding Black women.
Yeah, well, you know, there's the whole issue around disparities, and oftentimes, you know, there's a whole list of reasons. I mean, you know, Black women, when you look at all the data points, you know, Black women are at the bottom of them all in terms of the worst narrative on any of the, be it, you know, breast cancer, uterine cancer, diabetes, I mean, you name it, and we're the worst in terms of statistics. And part of that has to do with access, right? And a lot of that has to do with just things like how policies are framed and how they're structured oftentimes preclude us from having that access. And I'm trying to think of an example. I remember when I was at the Joint Center And I remember when they were trying to expand Medicaid. And some of that expansion, and it was a big issue, particularly for locations like Mississippi, for example. And I'll never forget the governor, because at the state level, sometimes there's federal legislation that passes, but then the governor and the legislature get to determine how that legislation is actually implemented in their state. Okay. And so if you've got a situation where this, the federal government decides they want to expand Medicaid, and then the governor decides we'll expand, but we won't allow certain services. We won't allow transportation. So if you're a woman, black woman that's living in rural Virginia, and you can't get access, say, to, gosh, it's escaping me, maternal care. I'm trying to think of that.
Oh, WIC.
No, not, well, it could be WIC, but it's like, when you're pregnant, your first trimester of your pregnancy, right? Okay. And you need to go see the doctor, and you need to make sure that you're doing all the right things.
Gotcha.
But if you if you don't have access to health care, even if it's a community health clinic, if it's 50 miles, and you're relying on your Medicaid to cover that, and the state is not allowing you to access that, that's a barrier. That's a policy barrier. And if we don't pay attention to that level of policies and how policies are done, we're going to see more black women dying at childbirth, right?
Wow.
So those are the kinds of real life circumstances. And oftentimes these are black women who are not sort of what people might perceive, but I mean, we have black women who are dying at childbirth that are well educated, well resourced, but are still not surviving pregnancy, which should be a normal thing, right? And some of that has to do with racism and has to do with a lot of other factors, but racism is a big one for women, right? I mean, those statistics are startling to me when I think back working on health disparities issues.
Right, and I appreciate how NCBW is helping to bring clarity to the narrative. You said something really key when you said that they're black. I think there was a previous Olympic medalist who died recently in childbirth. And she's, she's probably the epitome of health. And I think that when people think about or they assume someone who has died of childbirth, that maybe they didn't have the best health, or maybe they had a dangerous lifestyle, or maybe this or maybe that. But when you think about if someone is wealthy, they have access to resources. But when it comes to visibility in the medical field, if they don't have that, then that person's life is at risk. So kudos to NCBW for that policy work that you all are doing.
And a lot of what we do, in our advocacy, it's also an educational component to it as well. So we're also trying to educate women and girls in our community about the implications of different things to prevent certain things from happening as well. So that's really important to us, that the advocacy is important, and really, going to that legislator's office or going to that, policymaker's office. But the reality is that it's also about educating and empowering individuals to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely. Please make sure you join us. Please don't go anywhere as we continue our conversation with the president of the Northern Virginia chapter of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
It's a beautiful day out here. Sunny today with light breezes, giving way to clouds in the afternoon. We could see some light precipitation to moderate precipitation later on, followed by powerful storm-like conditions. 90 miles per hour winds are expected. Authorities are asking everyone, stay indoors. Come on, that's it. Let's go.
Oh, Dad, wait till you see the bike we got for Jake.
Hearing loss happens gradually with age, making it easy to ignore. Yet most older Americans aren't getting their hearing tested. Untreated hearing loss can keep your loved ones from enjoying what they cherish most.
Dad, can you hear me?
Don't let that happen. Speak up about hearing loss. You'll be glad you did.
You can't buy a best friend. You can love them, pet them, care for them, whether they want you to or not. You can take a picture, you can jump, yell, you can fly to the moon, travel the world, or just stay in bed. You can't buy a best friend like that, but you can adopt one. 'Cause we're connected.
Cook foods to the right temperature using a food thermometer. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
And thank you so much for joining us back on Inside Scoop as we continue our conversation with the president of the Northern Virginia chapter of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Gina Wood. So when we left with the previous segment, we were talking about the importance of representation, where policy is being created, where policy is being spoken of, and we would be remiss if we did not talk about the Crown Act.
Yes.
So talk about NCBW's help with pushing that forward.
So that's a good example of how, you know, having this national organization that's a collection of chapters across the country. And so actually it was our California chapters who really brought that to our attention in terms of the Crown Act. And we were on a call and they were talking about how trying to get legislation passed state by state. And so we were very active in Virginia to get the Crown Act passed and signed by the president, by the governor in Virginia.
So for our viewers who might not know what the Crown Act is, what is it?
So the Crown Act is legislation that was introduced because for whatever reason, people had a concern about how Black women's hair, how we wear our hair, right? Either natural, relaxed, or whatever choices people make. And we found, I mean, there was evidence where there was discrimination being done in the workplace as it relates to that Black women weren't getting jobs, they were being harassed, they were being written up in the workplace, I mean, by their HR departments, I mean, just all a host of things. Just unbelievable to me when you think about it.
Right.
And so
I think it's important to point out too that these weren't, you know, I think it's important that people understand the cultural implications of our hair.
Yes.
Bantu knots.
Yes.
Locks.
Yes.
Sister locks.
Yes.
Twists. Did I say cornrows yet?
Yes.
Afro puffs.
Yes.
Afros. Like even just talking about it, excuse me, even just talking about it brings a smile to our faces because those hairstyles mean something
to us. Absolutely.
Right. And so when that is repressed, or when those cultural expressions are made to seem criminal, or they somehow translate to a lack of ability, or somehow it speaks to, you know, someone's inability to represent a corporation or an organization, that hurts.
It hurts a lot.
And there are social implications, there are mental health implications with that. So this Crown Act was very, very important. So I wanted our viewers to really understand the impact of this legislation.
Yeah. And you might note that just recently, for those folks who live in this area, and particularly our sisters who are anchor women, if you notice, there was a whole flurry of celebration on the anniversary because, you know, it was signed by law, right?
Yes.
At the national level, but certainly in Virginia as well. We were very excited about it. And so I saw people posting on their Facebook pages their images of how they wear their hair now. So there's a real push where a lot of women are going to natural hair, right? And it's not that it's a choice. I mean, it's a preference for whatever women have, but that's just the beauty of Black women. You know, we come in all kinds of shades, all kinds of colors. We project ourselves differently. And you don't typically see that with other women, quite honestly, right? It's a statement of who we are, and we're a proud woman, right? We are proud Black women.
Right.
And so we project who we want to be, and some people have a hard time with that. And so what was really nice about the Crown Act was just seeing how it really sort of bonded us together as Black women across the country in terms of thinking about, as you so eloquently described, the situations and circumstances. And people have really stepped back now. You know, there are reasons now that people can, you know, employers can be sued as a result of that in terms of being treated differently in terms of Black women in the workplace.
Right. I think just to bring it full circle, because when you talked about in our previous segments how the women in New York who started NCBW started in the kitchen. I remember in the kitchen as a kid, straightening a comb.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
And just the whole process and holding down your ear.
Oh yes.
But all of it, and then also getting relaxers and the smell and that whole process. And don't scratch your head 2 days before.
Yes, yes, I do remember that. Yes.
Right. And so now it's interesting that coming out, those relaxers were causing cancer. So if people kind of understood the hoops and the mental gymnastics that Black women went through for straight hair.
Absolutely.
Because our natural hair kept us from getting jobs, kept us from getting loans, kept us, sometimes kept us from getting a partner.
Right, and imagery, right? Like there was a whole image that people had made their own perceptions of who a person was based on how they looked. And oftentimes for a Black woman, it was about her hair.
Right.
And it's just so insulting when you think about that, right?
Right.
It's so insulting.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I know I keep interrupting, but I want people to understand the importance of this legislation. So, okay, so the work
it's something we were very, very proud of, both locally, particularly because we really stepped in and pushed really hard. And our Richmond chapter was really instrumental, and you know, all the chapters really in Virginia. It was like one of our primary issues when we went down that year for Legislative Day to advocate. And I think it was actually the last year before COVID. Now that I think about it, yeah, COVID kind of impacts our time sequence here, but it was actually the last time I recall. This would have been 2019 in January that we were face to face before COVID in the legislature, and it was about the Crown Act, and it passed, and it was signed. So yeah, that was something really phenomenal for us as an organization in Virginia. Wow. And the fact that we worked together with our sister chapters was really special. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Absolutely.
So speaking of the work that you all do, so there's the Crown Act, but you all have a scholarship now for
So we have, you know, within our areas, be it, you know, the health, education, economic empowerment, you know, we do a lot of programming throughout the year. And this has been an incredible year for us as a chapter. Because, you know, we have new women coming in every year. We do sort of an intake process. And it's been really exciting to see the growth. Since I've been in the chapter, I joined the local chapter in 2018. And every year when we have our biennial conference at the national level, different chapters get recognized for different things. And our chapter, since I've been in the chapter, has been recognized as a model chapter amongst all the 67 chapters. Now, we're not the only model chapter, but the fact that we've met all the compliances and standards. And a lot of that has to do with our programming, but most importantly, our advocacy is probably the highest points that you can get in terms of being measured, because we submit a progress report every year on that. But we've, you know, mental health has been one of the big issues this year, really coming out of the pandemic. And so we've really been conscious about, you know, the implications, because actually one of our legislative issues was during COVID also, in terms of what was happening to kids. Do they have access to, you know, their education? You know, kids were at home trying to learn, trying to be in the classroom, and all those sorts of things. So we were very concerned about the implications to our children. Did they have the iPads? Did they have computers? You know, were they able to do that? And what did that do to them being at home? And did they have the right kind of environment at home to learn?
Right.
So that was a big issue for us. But recently, one of the issues that has been particularly important to us is the issue around suicide. And so that's been one of the big issues in terms of like breaking the silence among Black women and really opening up about some of the challenges that we have, because racism is real for Black women. And so some of that can be very, very harmful. And so we spend a lot of time dealing with both suicide, but also the seasonal depressions that women can go through as well. Those have been all really important in our health focus, but metabolic syndrome, heart disease, have been other issues in health. And you know, one of the things that we also did this year, which was really fun with some of the other organizations, was really looking at childhood obesity. You know, that was something that was a big issue for Miss Obama when she was the First Lady. And we've continued to focus in on that because that's still a big issue for our kids. And you probably have seen in statistics that we're seeing that kids are, you know, the whole issue with kids and weight is continuing to grow again. And so kids are not exercising and they're not getting the right proper nutrition.
Absolutely. I think going back to something that you mentioned for mental health, like suicide and that body of work, I think one thing that within our community that we continue to talk about is that trope of the strong Black woman.
Yes.
Personally, I don't mind that label. I know that's who I am, but there are parameters around that everyone responds to differently. So imagine, you know, you've got your hair, as you mentioned. We mentioned childhood obesity, working from home, or have your children now learning from home. That's just, there's a lot into just that label of Black women. You can take this. You should be able to put up with this.
And they're carrying so much. You know, it's like the things that you describe. But you know, even within the chapter, you know, when we've got close to 65 women in our chapter, And so when you think about the statistics, when they talk about 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 and 1 in 6, well, on those data points, we're seeing that even with the women in our chapter. So right now, you know, women are not well. I mean, these health issues are real that people are having. You know, be it heart disease, be it, you know, hypertension, high blood pressure, are real issues for Black women right now, particularly in Northern Virginia, because I see these women that are in my chapter. The other big issue that I'm finding is women are caregivers for their ailing parents, right? Heavy load, so they're trying to work, they're trying to raise their family. Some of them have a partner, some of them don't, some of them doing the single parent, you know, sort of thing. So there's a lot that Black women are carrying. But at the same time, you can flip that too, because, you know, the reality is that when you think about elections, when Black women vote, everybody votes in that family. And so there's a power amongst Black women. And if you think about it, in Virginia particularly, the data goes back to show that when Virginia flipped to what they quote now call blue state, purple state, red state, whatever, Black women were very instrumental when Virginia flipped to become a blue state, and there's data that supports that.
Wow.
And so Black women have been very much in the forefront on the voting piece, for sure, in terms of getting people out to vote and voting and making a difference with these elections. And I think we're starting to realize the power that we have to do that.
Yes.
Because if you might recall, even with Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, there was a full-page ad that was put in, I believe it was the New York Times, maybe even the Post, where Black women signed and said, there will be a Black woman vice president on this ticket.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see our voice and raise our voices in circles now, and we're seeing the power that we can have in those different the policy decision makings that are going on.
Absolutely, even within our justice
Yes.
branch with now Justice Jackson.
Yes.
But before, when she was a nominee, there was a huge just outcry of support.
Oh, absolutely.
There's an organization called Sister SCOTUS.
Yes.
And they had a roster of women that could possibly fill this seat, but we all remember her confirmation hearing and just how tough that was to watch.
Oh,
so
yes.
absolutely, we need support wherever we can get it.
And we're starting to see that difference, not just in Virginia, but across the country. More Black women running for office, I mean, in record numbers, and winning in major cities in terms of mayors, and in some cases, statewide offices even. So I'm really encouraged about the shift in terms of Black women seeing their power and the influence that they can have. In fact, there's a group that I participate in, and you probably have seen a lot of things on Facebook, but it's called Win with Black Women. And it was a young Black woman who actually started that. And it actually started as a result of Madam Vice President, so, and getting her elected to office. It was just fun, and we still continue to connect, so.
Absolutely. I think I know who you're talking about. I'll allude to that during our next segment. Please make sure you don't go anywhere and come right back as we finish our final segment with Gina Wood, President of the Northern Virginia chapter of NCBW.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, I'm Josh Temple. You might have seen me on TV where I help folks turn their houses into dream homes. But forget construction. Parenting is the toughest job there is. So when you need help or advice, turn to the parenting experts at Boys Town.
I was afraid of that.
Well, guess it's time to get you fixed.
Your pets will start fooling around sooner than you think.
Go on, get out of here!
Accidental litters lead to millions killed in shelters each year. Help prevent more. Fix at month 4.
Food. It nourishes, brings us together, and adds flavor to life. That's why it's important to wash hands, surfaces, and fresh produce. Keep raw meat, poultry, and seafood separate from ready-to-eat foods like fruits and vegetables. And cook to proper temperatures using a food thermometer. Enjoy, and refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours. For more tips on safely preparing foods, visit homefoodsafety.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
And thank you so much for coming back and joining us on Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Deborah Woolen, and we are going to finish up our conversation with Gina Wood, president of the Northern Virginia chapter of NCBW, also known as the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. So Gina, before we left, we were talking about just the different areas of legislation and why it's important for us to focus on Black women, how Black women impact our small businesses, therefore the U.S. economy, how we impact, how we helped to flip Virginia. But I also want to make sure that people understand that when you support a Black woman, you're not only supporting the people who are Black and people who are women, and how just, can you share how Black women really do see the big picture for men, women, Black, white, Asian, older, younger, how we really do, because of our unique position with intersectionality essentially at the bottom, how when we open up doors for everyone.
Right. So when you've been sort of at that lowest level in terms of all the data, by lifting up the Black woman, you're lifting up not only the Black woman, her family, but the community as a whole. But then also that actually builds out into the broader community as well, in terms of both economically, in terms of having healthy communities. When I think about the social determinants of health, you help a Black woman around those issues, it's going to help the entire community. So, part of the reason that I think an organization like the Coalition is imperative to exist is because no one is really focusing on the issues that impact Black women. But if you look at the byproducts of the work that we do, it really strengthens our communities as a whole. It strengthens the country as a whole in terms of having good policies. Because the reality is that if you support us, then it's going to support the broader community in general. Because all the things that we're talking about is kind of like what President Obama used to talk about, is that these are not issues or policies that are based on one specific sector. These are policies that impact the entire community. And so that's really how I see our work in the same vein. It's just having that primary focus on Black women and girls, but at the end of the day, it's going to help everybody, and it's going to make a difference for everybody.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of the events that NCBW, the Nova chapter, has coming up.
Yeah. Well, what I'm really excited about is our program year ends September 30th, so we're kind of on the federal fiscal year. And so we just submitted our progress report to the national office that really highlights all the work that we've done. And I just can't thank my coalition sisters for all the incredible work that they've done this past year, the folks in the community that have been partners with us, and the work that we've done. So we'll continue to do that programming, because that's something that we just will continue to do year after year, and really make sure that the issues that we're focused on are relevant to the community. One of the things that we want to do more is get out in the community more and really listen to the community and make sure that we're on target in terms of what our focus is and having an impact, because impact is very important to us. But I'm really excited about being able to look back and also look forward in terms of the fact that next year is our 40th anniversary as a Northern Virginia chapter. And so I've appointed a couple of co-chairs that I'm excited about. They're probably the two youngest women in our chapter.
Do you want to shout them out here?
I would love to do that. And hopefully their names will be familiar. Laurel Langhorne, who's very active with the NAACP, and Dr. Bathsheba Bryant Tarpey are my co-chairs. And they both, Dr. Tarpey Bryant was our outgoing historian, so she collected a lot of information while she was our historian, and Laurel is now doing more in terms of thinking about that we're doing and capturing all the work that we've done over the last year. So they've got some really incredible ideas about how we can really celebrate all year. Like our actual date, I believe, is January 13th. Of 2024 will be the actual day. And so they're planning on doing some fun things. We just had a conversation about this where we're thinking about doing a tea, we might do a brunch. Some of the events that we do every year, I mentioned like the Ebony Image Award, and we're always looking for women to be nominated, to be recognized, that have provided leadership in various fields. We also sometimes we do a sisterhood lunch, which is a fundraiser for our scholarship program. And then upcoming in November, we have every year, it's the third Saturday in November, we have what we call our annual forum. And typically that's an opportunity where we'll have a panel discussion. We'll bring in experts in different areas. Sometimes they may be members of our chapter, maybe other women in the community that are doing things in different areas, and we'll have a discussion on a particular topic. This year it might be focused more on the upcoming election potentially, but we also have been really reaching out to other organizations to think about how we can do more together. So I think there's going to be sort of a collaboration theme for us next year in terms of the work that we're doing. So I'm really excited about just, when you have an anniversary, like the 40th anniversary, one of the things it allows you to do is increase your visibility. And so that's one of the things that we want to do, is increase our visibility in the community and really at more of what one would call the grassroots level. Like I say, we work with the churches, we work with other civic organizations, we work with, the fraternities, sororities, others, but we really want to make sure that we're reaching all the women in our community and making sure that they see that they're a part of this, and we want them to benefit from our programming that we provide.
Okay, so this seems like a pretty regal group of women. So let's just say someone is looking at this right now, they're just like, oh my goodness, I'd like to be a part of this organization. What type of women or what type of members are you all looking for?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit biased as the president, but I would say that, the organization, even nationally, when I look at its members, a lot of the women in the organization are much older. I would say probably my age and older. And so I'm really excited about thinking about the next generation of women that will carry the baton in terms of continuing this advocacy effort that we're doing. So I'm really interested in getting more young women, 40 and under, is one of the areas that I'm focused on. But it's not just in terms of age, it's also we want women as part of our organization that can help us. We're a nonprofit, all volunteer organization. So we need to make, and because we're a 501c3 organization, we have to meet all the requirements at the federal and state level. So like any nonprofit, you want to have individuals on your board, for example, or in your organization that, have finance backgrounds or have human resources backgrounds, and different areas of profession is what we're really looking for. So I think any woman that wants to be a part of the organization is certainly welcome. There's a nomination process. If you go to our website, you'll see information about our upcoming intake process, where we're starting to reach out now to women in the community to nominate women. But it's really about, to be honest, it's really wanting women who have the time to contribute to the work that we do and want to advocate and have a passion about the mission. I mean, there's no real status per se that I see in terms of women being a part of the organization. It's really about just caring about, other women in the community and wanting to be a part in helping young girls, because, we do mentor young women as well. We work in the Arlington public school system, and so we do things with middle schoolers. So we really try to keep them involved in our work. We had a workshop with them, not last year, I guess it was, that we're teaching them about coding, for example. And so really thinking about what's important. We have a big initiative on STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, all those focus areas. So that's some of the kinds of stuff that we do right now. But we also want to make sure that we're helping young women in terms of their college preparation. And that's why our scholarship program is really the focus that we have when we do our fundraising, is to really raise money to support them through our programming that we do.
So we're talking doctors, policymakers, women who work at Walmart, women who work at Wawa, homemakers, moms, grandmoms, single moms.
Right. And I think the
children.
thing that's probably the thing that's probably difficult, and that's with most organizations, is that there is a process in terms of dues, because again, we don't have like a machine of fundraising, and so we rely on the dues that individuals pay for the local chapter. But to be a part of the national organization, there's also an assessment that's given where we also have to pay dues to be a part of the national chapter, and that's really the real only revenue that we get. Now we get sponsorships for some of our events, but other than that, that's really the main thing. And so that's probably could be the potential barrier for some women, is sort of the dues structure. But again, we still want women to be able to participate in our work. If they can't be members, we still want them to be exposed to our programs.
Absolutely. And so how can people get in contact with NCBW?
So our website is probably the best place to go. And there's lots of information there that keeps people informed of the events that are coming up. There'll be information posted there about the nominations process for women that may want to join the organization. So I would encourage women to do that. We actually have both a a Facebook page, all the social media platforms we try to stay on. And
Instagram,
we try to promote
Twitter,
all those things. And then we try to make sure for women that may not be able to get out that we try to record our events as well. So you can go back and look at those over time, because the information is so rich and our speakers are typically pretty outstanding.
Gotcha. And so I know that we've been posting the website and social media on the show while we've been talking. So I've really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing the events and maybe even attending some of the events that you all have for the rest of the year and maybe even into 2024. So everybody knows this is my favorite part of the show. It is. I'm going to do a hybrid this time of like, would you rather, and then just maybe you sharing a bit about yourself. So without any, with no further ado, right? Okay, so would you rather breakfast for dinner or dinner for breakfast?
Oh, that's a good question. Breakfast for dinner or dinner for breakfast? I probably would do dinner for breakfast.
Okay.
And part of it is, I was trying to think about how do I fit it in. I am a person who loves to go to teas. I actually collect teapots.
Do you now?
Yeah, I have a whole collection of teapots. Wherever I go, if I can find one, like at an antique store or something. And so, so that's probably, it's more like a brunch when I think about the dinners. In fact, there's a thing now that people call dunch, where, yes, I have friends in Chicago who, they do this thing called dunch, and they don't eat after 5 o'clock. And so they sort of combine lunch and dinner because they're very health conscious, which is great. And so they call it their dunch time.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to dunching.
To dunching, right?
Okay. Books or movies?
Wow, I haven't been able to read many books. I love books. I love buying books. And I always encourage friends to write books. I don't think we have enough people writing books and good books, right? But movies, I love going to the movies if it's a good movie. There's not been a lot of good movies, but the last movie that I saw was so wonderful. And it was the movie where the young woman was the mermaid. What's the name of the movie? God, it's escaping me.
The Mermaid?
The black woman that was the young black woman that was
The Little Mermaid?
The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
I guess it was the Mermaid.
Yeah.
The Little Mermaid. Yeah. That was just a wonderful movie that I love to see. But I have to admit, I can't wait to see Mission Impossible.
Really?
Oh yeah, I'm a huge fan, huge fan of Mission Impossible, yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, and 50 seconds left. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Wow, the best piece of advice that I've ever received. That's a good question. I've gotten a lot of advice from a lot of good people. And I think it's really more about just being yourself. Don't try to be something that you're not, just be yourself. And I think part of that has to do with just my spiritual journey. I'm a Christian and I'm very much walk in faith. And so I think part of it is like staying focused on that really makes a difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Yeah.
Gina, we look forward to the events that you all will do in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time on the Inside Scoop.
Thank you, Deborah.